So FM26 broke scouting filters, but I found a way around it. But you see, for some unknown reason, the ability to save and load and import and export scouting filters has been removed from the game, at least temporarily, which means that should you want to use various different scouting filters, you will have to input them manually every single time you want to use them, which is an incredibly tedious and painstaking process, especially if you use some of the filters I do that have like 30 different conditions. But for today, I have for you a workaround, which will still be incredibly useful tools even when this stuff is added back into the game. Fingers crossed. I can't fix it, but I can make it less painful. In my opinion, at least, filters form the backbone of pretty much all of the most efficient forms of scouting that exist in Football Manager, and almost all of the scouting guides I made for the last game involve filters in some manner, be it the team report scouting, the national team scouting, the 20 is plenty scouting especially. So it was absolutely crucial that one, I could set them up and give them to you so you could just plug them straight into your game, and two, that I could switch between them easily by just loading and saving them, which is a function that, as you can see, is now completely absent from FM26. And the thing is, it's not just the absence of importing and exporting, some of the filters within it are actually completely broken as well. Two in particular, one of which is the knowledge function, which obviously, as you can see here, I've set at most to none, and it's still showing all the players. There is no way of setting this where it either doesn't show everybody or nobody. So this one is entirely broken. The other is the day since scout report created filter, which formed the backbone of the team report scouting setup, which you set to is not between 0 and 999. And you'll note here, of course, that you only get one variable box. So it's between something and nothing. Now, because I'm ever the optimist, I suspect the reason for the lack of importing and exporting is likely because some of these filters are not yet currently working properly, and the idea of having them go in and out of the game could potentially cause more issues. But in the meantime, it is still difficult, so luckily we've got workarounds. But just you wait, because once these are working, that team report scouting method video will be dropping hard, because there's a lot of stuff in the background that does still work similarly, but with some tweaks. Introducing my temporary solution that could still be very useful long term. I've made individual views for every single role that exists in the game. Turns out there are 79 of them, so now you know, both in and out of possession. Because unlike filters, views can still be imported and exported, even though they've moved the box for some reason. In previous games, it would have been on this menu here where you select the view. In fact, it even says custom views there, except now, for some reason, you now have to right-click on a column and you'll see down here the import view option is there. And that is how you import the views, because they can still be imported, exported, saved, and loaded. Firstly, due to the lack of separators, unfortunately, it is just a mass of attributes, but I will explain the logic to these because there is a pattern you can follow. The one I currently have selected is poacher in possession, just because I chose it at random. But what these attributes are the key and preferred attributes for the role that we have selected, i.e. in this case, poacher in possession. Meaning that if you go to a player's profile in the game, these are the attributes that the game highlights as being crucial for the role. The ones highlighted in green are the key and the blue are the preferred ones. Now, the way that I've divided them up on this screen, since you can't use separated, is different to how I did it in the past, but I think this is going to do for now. Going across from left to right, it's technical, mental attributes, then physical. But within that, the ones on the left-hand side, other than being obviously in alphabetical order, are going to be the key ones, and then the ones on the right-hand side of that section will be the preferred ones. So in this case, finishing and heading are more important than first touch for this role, meaning that they have been shuffled to the left-hand side, and then once you get out the technique thing, it does the exact same thing again. Lord, I wish I could put a bar in between just to make it slightly easier to see, but it's the best I could do, and there was no other way of designating it really, other than clumping all the key on one side and all the preferred on the other, but I felt that that separated too many attributes that you might want to look at together. But obviously you can just shuffle them around yourself. Also included is the player's status, the player's name, country, position, age, ability and potential, should you know it, club, transfer value, and wage range of what they're currently on. Some of these views that have more attributes, the data on the right-hand side may well get shuffled off the side of the screen, and since you can't scroll across, it's kind of missing for now. It is still built into each view though, that way when they bring back the auto size all options thing and it works properly, they should all still be there. It's just a temporary problem, hopefully. We're making do with what we got. Installation is pretty simple. In the description to the video, I've left a Mediafire link. It's a zip file that has all 79 views in it. Simply drop it into Sports Interactive Football Manager 26 views. If the folder doesn't exist, you'll have to create it. Best to just save it in there and then unzip it in that folder. It'll dump all of the views out and then they should be importable. Once they're in there, you just click on one of these, hit import view, and you should see them all in a big folder here. So select the one you want in here and then just hit load. Now there is a chance you may run into a bug where it clearly does load the view, but the name up here doesn't change and it's not appearing in the custom views option. If that does happen, do not panic. Just hit squad or go out of this screen and then come back into it and it should then update perfectly. If you are going to make changes to these for your own exporting needs, make sure that you rename them before you do that. Otherwise, it will keep the exact same name that I have, no matter how many times you export the file. It will still be called free roll IP, for example, unless you rename it before the exporting. You might also be wondering why my attribute colors here are a little bit different to the base game. That's because I'm using one of the mods that changes the colors. It's crazy that's not in the game. Hopefully that comes too. These are obviously just my own personal preferences for colors, seasoned to your own taste. The only other thing that of course matters here is your scouting knowledge, i.e. how many different countries your club has knowledge of and the levels of knowledge for those individual countries. And in case you were wondering where to find that screen, it's buried like hell, but we do know where it is. So if you go to recruitment focuses, then up to the top here is a tiny button called assignments. Inside that, you'll see your scouting assignments, but also the world knowledge page. You might be able to search for it as well, but this is where it actually natively lives. Point is, on the nation screen, you can see exactly which countries you have knowledge of and from who that knowledge is coming. The reason this matters is because when you've not scouted a player yet, all that base knowledge is going to come from this information. So firstly, just getting knowledge of a nation is important because it will allow you to see more attributes of the players based in that nation or potentially even from that nation. And the better the knowledge you have of a country, the more tight the ranges on those attributes will be. But what not a lot of people realize is that knowledge doesn't always have to come purely from your scouts. They'll obviously have the most because they're designed that way, but other members of staff can still generate knowledge to you. The best examples we have here are all of our Nigeria knowledge comes from Tersu Alu, who is our head of sports science, and all of our Montenegro knowledge comes from Uroš Djordjevic, who is a sports scientist, which means there's a lot of roles around the club that if you're like on the fence about two staff members for the same role, maybe choose the one that has an interesting nationality because it will give you some extra scouting knowledge. It genuinely does. It's always good to play a bit of map men. I'm the men and well, there was the map. Maybe that'll be back. In practice, what it's going to mean is that you'll see a lot more information that looks like this on these screens rather than this, where there's not a lot of information to go round. It's also smart before you engage in this type of scouting to build a shortlist that's specific for the role you're looking for. So in this case, we'll just call it test. So the way that I actually use these views is as follows. You still want to use the filters a little bit, but mostly just for basic stuff. So if we're looking for a poacher, we obviously want a striker, and we can obviously set an age range there. And there's other things you could add, but don't add too much because you won't be able to save it because the bulk of the stuff is done on this screen. So at this point, I like to choose the most important attribute I want on this player. And for me, it's something like finishing, but you want to also have some other ideas in mind as well. So for example, something like composure. Now, if you hold shift and then click on composure, it'll sort it the wrong way first and then potentially the right way if you click it a few times. The shift sort does still work, but it's a little bit less efficient than it used to be in that it seems to sort by the lowest value on the secondary sort rather than the highest part of the range, which is a little annoying, but it still gives you an idea of some players. And a lot of the ranges are fairly small tiebreakers anyway, but it just can help with reshuffling certain parts. And in theory, you can go on forever with that, but I wouldn't recommend it yet. And then all I do is I will scroll down the screen looking for any kind of clumps of color that look good across the board. Like for example, this guy, Raul Garcia. And as I go through, I'll simply add them to that new test shortlist. Now you may encounter situations like this when a player looks quite decent across the board, but you don't have a lot of knowledge of that guy. For example, this fella here from Villefranche. But it's still worth adding him to the shortlist for the time being. And this is the reason I prefer this type of scouting to using attribute filters, because if we'd look for this same kind of setup using filters and said we want minimum 14 finishing and then reasonable composure, a lot of these players would have been filtered out because the game doesn't consider these guys to have attributes at all because you don't know them, which is good for triage in one sense, but it also means that you may miss out on a lot of guys just because your scouting knowledge isn't up to date on them, meaning that he very well could have very good composure, we just don't know yet. This kind of just lets you make your own decision. We're just going to keep going down, noticing anybody who looks good in certain colors, basically. So for me, it's green and blue, although blue's a lot rarer because of the way that it colors them at the moment. Anybody, as I scroll down, that looks to have good stuff across the board, you'll notice you want to keep scrolling and it will bring you another batch of players when it takes to the next step down. So this guy here might be a good look. We've got a few guys, they're on the test shortlist. Obviously, you'll want to do more. That's just for me for now. But of course, in 26, we now have in and out of possession roles, which means your player, sure, he may well be a very good poacher, but is he going to be able to play the other role that you use, since he's going to have to do both to a certain level? So in my current tactic, I use a central outlet center forward out of possession. So I've now loaded that view in the same exact way, and now I'm going to do the same logic on this side. Thinking, what do I think is important here? Is work rate something that's going to matter? Let's just have a look at work rate, perhaps, because a few guys with crazy good work rate. So again, you just do the same kind of thing, seeing who links up. And what you might notice is as you scroll down, you may run into some of the players like this lad here that you already did from the other side. So now you've got a direct comparison of some of the guys you thought looked good for the other role. So start going through, adding any players to the same shortlist that you like the look of from the out of possession side of things. And if you do see some players popping up from the previous side, quite towards the top, then you may have found a gem, or at the very least by the end of that, you'll have a nice little shortlist of players that in theory could at least do one or the other. Like these guys here, which you could either scout further or potentially approach right now if you really like what you see. Now I have tried to import those same views onto this screen so you could do another comparison, but unfortunately the game considers them different types of views. because reasons. So I'd have to go through and remake all 79 of them for this screen again. Simply, those took 8 hours to make. Maybe at some point I'll release a pack that has these ones for this screen in it as well. But for the time being, you'll have to sort of generate your own ones for this one. But that's okay, because you should already know these guys fit your requirements fairly well, otherwise they wouldn't be here in the first place. And when you've only got 10 or 15 guys here, it's quite easy to look at their profiles and triage things yourself. One last thing, a proper example of a player I found using this that I don't think I would have been able to find otherwise. This is Alexander Prass. We have him on loan from Hoffenheim for the rest of the season, and he was found using exactly this method. Now we play a wingback in possession, and you can see he fits almost all of the requirements for a wingback. Now there's a couple of areas where perhaps he could have done a little bit better there, but that was a decision I made considering how good he was elsewhere, because importantly we play a pressing fullback out of possession and he fits all of the requirements and then some in that role as well. Only really his marking and positioning are a little on the low side, but it's things you can work on, right? And I just don't know if I would have been able to find him or zero in the same way, certainly not as quickly, without using views like this. And while it's great for finding players that could slot straight into your team because they meet your exact requirements, I think it could also be useful for finding youngsters for the future, because you still want them to in theory fit your tactical style. So if you see a few standout attributes on players that are 16, 17, 18, then it still gives you a real scope for scouting those guys too, even if they don't meet all of the requirements yet. Quick note for those of you on the Patreon, I have sent a message out about getting your player data in for the Wisła Kraków Building a Nation save, which will be starting on stream upon the full release, maybe like a week after. So you may want to check over there, as there's a new list of information this year because we found some cool stuff. Don't worry, a lot of the Building a Nation stuff from previous games does still work, and there's been some improvements in certain areas as well. I know, crazy to say, but doing a guide about that in the next week or so. And the second they do fix a load of those filters and make them importable and exportable, might beware of the deluge of scouting videos coming your way from this guy right here. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful in some way. You can thank me by leaving a like or subscribing if you're new. See you guys in the next video. Hold your gun, capybara, bye-bye.